You have seen me with this Chromebook next to me is because I'm recording this presentation. I'm not recording you, I'm only recording myself for a school assignment. Okay, so just so don't worry about if you see me next to the video here. Um, so yesterday we talked about the four domains that we have in Invest, and especially already went through. Do you review those? After I was getting chairs, so because yesterday we needed more chairs. So today we're gonna be talking about domain one, and then Ms. Jenkins is gonna present domain four. Now domain one is all domains are important, but I would say domain one is essential because that's the planning and preparation. So if we don't plan well, then what's gonna happen? We don't know what we're doing, right? So that's why it's important. And when we plan, it's not just to plan what we're teaching, but how we're teaching it, what resources we need. So it is a very, very important domain. So with that said, you have your smart cards and just FYI, the way we're going to present today is going to be very similar to what we did yesterday. We're going through some scenarios, and you know that we expect your participation. We appreciate your participation. We're going to ask you to show your neighbors for a few seconds, and that always helps because it's always good when you hear from somebody else. We do that with the students. We want the students to be engaged. We want the students to participate, to collaborate. Same with you. So you're gonna use your card. So planning and preparation. Let's look at it and let's see first how many competences do you see? If we can 1A, 1B, 1C. We have six, right? So as you can see, not all domains have the same number of competencies. So talking about domain one, let's look at each of them. So domain one, we have 1A.
Component 1A measures teacher effectiveness pertaining to their knowledge of content and pedagogy. There are numerous teacher actions that take place that demonstrate their knowledge for this component. For example, teachers are familiar with the major concepts and skills of the subjects they teach. Multiple explanations of the content are provided to the students both verbally and in writing. Student questions are answered with accuracy and with multiple explanations in an effort to ensure clarity. Feedback is extensive and promotes additional learning. Teacher lesson plans include learning experiences that build on prior knowledge of skills and concepts. And the strategies they select engage students in the learning and are aligned with the concepts being taught. Component 1B requires teachers to not only know their content, but to also know the students to whom they will teach the content to. Teaching practices may include the following types of activities. Lessons are developmentally appropriate and are differentiated for learners who may have varied needs. Activities reflect an understanding of individual student needs. Teachers develop a comprehensive learning profile for each student that includes learning style preferences, intelligence preferences, culture preferences, and gender-based preferences. Resources and materials are adjusted to reflect cultural sensitivity, and the teacher meets regularly with other school personnel to understand the current needs of each student. Component 1C is setting instructional outcomes. Instructional outcomes identify exactly what students will be expected to learn. They do not describe what students will do, but what they will learn. The outcomes should be scaffolded, build on prior learning, and establish a foundation for future learning. They should represent a deep understanding of the content that can be transferred to other content areas. These outcomes should be specific, doable, and allow for informal assessment. The teacher and the students should work together to determine how students will demonstrate understanding of the outcome. Component 1D assesses the teacher's ability to utilize a variety of resources that are aligned with the teacher's instructional outcomes. To enhance the learning experiences of their students, teachers should be aware of the resources provided by the district in addition to the wide variety of resources available to teachers through various sources. Skilled teachers improve one's own professional knowledge and skill set by seeking out resources both within the school and beyond for information and insight to new learning. They also seek out colleagues to share and expand content knowledge. Component 1E Designing coherent instruction is the heart of planning and requires educators to have a clear understanding of the content, curriculum, and state and district expectations for student learning. In addition, it requires teachers to understand the characteristics of the students they teach. The sequence of learning activities in a unit or lesson should ensure that students are not rushed and that they have the opportunity for reflection and closure. The time devoted to the various parts of the lesson should be proportionate to the value of the lesson. The appropriate amount of time should be allocated for students to engage in meaningful learning that ensures that every student achieves the desired outcome. Component 1F will evaluate the effectiveness of the assessment design. Good teaching requires both the assessment of learning and the assessment for learning. Different types of instructional outcomes require different types of assessments. The teacher-designed assessment should be authentic with real-life application. Experienced teachers develop questions prior to a lesson that they will be able to use both to ascertain the general level of student understanding and to diagnose particular student misconceptions. Teachers should share with students information gained from formative assessments to discuss what will come next. Essentially, the purpose of assessment is to plan for future learning. Teacher plans should demonstrate how the teacher uses information from assessments to instruct individual students.
Can we go back?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to just make a few statements about each of these competencies. The first one, which is demonstrating knowledge of content. And you may think, I know what I'm teaching, right? Because we know what we're teaching. Based on what I've seen, I have 8 years as an administrator. I see that I go to the classroom sometimes, and teachers are confused about what they are teaching. So one recommendation is when you have your planning, when you are doing when you meet with your grade levels and you are planning the lessons, ask questions and ask. I mean, because if there's something that you don't understand, the best thing we can do is to ask. And there's nothing wrong. What happened is one lesson can be taught in different ways. So I can give you some examples, but pretty much my idea is always, when you do your planning, be sure that you know what you're teaching. Then going back to 1B, which is demonstrating knowledge of a student. Sometimes we tend to believe, okay, I know my kids. I know Juan and Maria and Richard, but that's not the case. It's not knowing the kids by their name or by their age, but it's knowing what needs do they have. How many of your kids are receiving accommodations? Do you have kids receiving that they're special ed, that they're in your classroom, but they're receiving inclusion services? Do you have kids that are what we call receiving 504 accommodations? Because that's the kind of knowledge that you need to have. Um, Pointing at the instructional outcomes. And if we look at that one, it says, is what the students are going to learn, not what they are going to do. When I go to the classrooms, I don't ask the kids what are you doing. We ask the kids what are you learning, because that's important. Even when you set the objective on the board, and I'm gonna give you an example. I mean, I went to a classroom and the teacher had an objective, something like the students will write sentences beginning with capital letter and ending with a period. That's great. But my question was, so what are they learning? Because what she had on the board, it was what the kids were doing, right? So that's the activity. But why the kids were writing sentences? Why they were writing sentences with capital letter at the beginning and with period at the end? So that's important that when you set your objective, is the outcome, not is the what they're learning, but not the how they're learning. And please stop me if you have questions. Sometimes I speak too fast, but I just want to clarify those kind of things that we have here. Student assessment, it is very important. And I don't want you to confuse designing a student assessment thinking that it has to be a quiz, that it has to be a test, because it's nothing like that. An assessment can be as easy as an exit slip, as a drawing, as a sharing with your neighbor what you understood, as doing like a circle at the end of the day and let's do a reflection. So there are many kind of assessments that they don't have to imply paper and pencil all the time. Okay, so moving on to the scenario that we have here. Similar to what we did yesterday, the scenarios has, sentences And guess what we're going to ask you to do later? We're going to ask you to identify what competencies these sentences apply to. So the scenario says, as Mr. Gonzalez planned his unit, he created three different follow-up activities designed to meet the variability levels of his students. On day one of the unit, Mr. Gonzalez shared the end goals from his unit plans for what the class will learn about weather. And the students brainstormed different ways in which they could be assessed based on those outcomes. The first mini lesson began with Mr. Gonzalez passing out a survey to the students on their beliefs about why studying weather was relevant to our daily lives. And then the whole group verbally discussed while Mr. Gonzalez wrote the ideas on an anchor chart. The students then developed a concept map that linked previous learning goals in nonfiction reading and writing to those they were currently working on in science as they studied weather. The first lesson ended with Mr. Gonzalez handing out the science textbook to his students to critique the weather chapter's content with a buddy and Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez said, I will use your feedback to create more engaging ways to learn this material in the form of a project instead of a reading straight from the book. During the last few lessons, where the students finished their projects and follow-up activities about weather, the students used books, newspapers, and diagrams that the teacher had coded by reading level to finish out the unit. Does that sound like a good lesson? Okay, we're gonna see. So we're going to first we're gonna look at every sentence, right, or a statement, and we're gonna match it with our smart card. So do you have your smart card by you? Okay. So let's try the first one together. As Mr. Gonzalez planned his unit, so he's just planning. He created three different follow-up activities designed to meet the variability levels of his students. So what are the key words here?
Varied ability of students.
Okay, there's a variety of students and also there are different follow-up activities, right? So it's not just to do one for everybody, but there are different kind of follow-up activities. So looking at your smart card, what do you think is the competency that relates or pertains to this specific statement?
1B.
Demonstrate knowledge of students? Okay, majority rules. Let's see what the answer is.
Oh,
B,
wow.
awesome.
These are on
Yay.
it. This is great.
Okay, any
You can go home now.
yeah. Any volunteer that would like to read the second
Remember,
one?
active participation will get us out of here
Yes.
faster, so come on.
Yeah, that we know the system. So any volunteer to read sentence number 2?
On day one of the unit, Mr. Gonzalez shared the end goals from his unit plan for what the class would learn about weather. And the students brainstormed different ways in which they could be assessed based on those outcomes.
Okay, so here we say that he shared the end goals from his unit plans. What else do we see? The students brainstorm different ways. So what is the competency that will apply to that?
I think 1F.
Okay, I hear 1F, I hear 1C.
Yeah, because it says that 1F is design and student assessment.
The students have different ways in which they could be assessed based on those outcomes. And the good thing is here, the students themselves are the ones that are creating ideas, right? Well, let's see what the answer is.
And there was different options.
And it's
Oh,
1F,
wow.
which is assessment. Okay?
All right. Yeah,
Let's
GT,
celebrate,
that's right.
yes.
You guys got this.
Who would like to read the next one?
No. Okay, what's the next one?
Anybody?
The lesson began with Mr. Gonzalez passing out a survey to students organizations about why studying weather is relevant to our daily lives. Then the whole group verbally discussed why Mr. Gonzalez wrote the idea on the paper.
Okay. And even though this is unit 1, which is planning, it's also what you do in the classroom. Because what you do in the classroom is a reflection of what you plan ahead of time. So what is the competency here? The first mini lesson began, there's a survey going on, the students are writing about their beliefs, why they think this is important, what is relevant to their their daily lives. So what do we see here?
I think 1A.
1A, 1B,
1A.
um,
I got it up there for you, Escalante. It's good.
1A.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next one.
The students then developed a concept map that linked previous learning goals in nonfiction reading and writing to those they were currently working on in science as they studied weather.
Who developed this? The students again, right? So now they develop concept maps, they're making connections with prior knowledge. So here, what do we have? 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, or 1F? Okay, let's see. It's 1C, which is setting instructional outcomes. And then we have the next one. So the first lesson ended with Mr. Gonzalez handing out the science textbook to his students to critique the weather chapter's contents with a buddy. And Mr. Gonzalez said, I will use your feedback to create more engaging ways to learn this material in the form of a project instead of a reading straight from the book.
1E.
What is it?
1E.
1E, designing coherent instruction. Is 1D, demonstrating knowledge of resources. Okay, they're looking at different kind of things that they're using. Bless you. And the last one,
During the last few lessons where the students finished their projects and follow-up activities about weather, the students used books, newspapers, and diagrams that the teacher had coded by reading level to finish out the unit.
do you see differentiation going on here with teacher providing those books by reading level, right? So he took time to decide on what level the students were and look at what level the students were. 1A, 1B, 1 is 1E, designing a student assessment. Let's give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. So moving on. So this is one example of a lesson plan. Now, different campuses, they have different kind of the way they want you to submit your lesson plan. But it's important that the lesson plan states what you are teaching, how you are teaching it, and how you are assessing, because it should be an alignment between objective, instruction, and assessment. And that's the basic thing, that we need to be clear about what we're teaching and what the students are learning, right? What is the outcome and how we're doing it, and then how we're assessing it. So let's take a few seconds to look at the lesson plan. If you look at the last one, which it says review and assessment includes homework. So this is the kind of lesson plan that they have here, this sample, but I'm telling you, I mean, if you have done lesson plans so far, not everybody includes the homework in the lesson plan. So just, you have to do what your campus administrator or the instructional coaches has suggested you to do.
Okay, so just paying attention to the highlighted areas. Obviously, you can't read what's underneath it. And now you're going to do a little activity with this. So you got to find a buddy partner.
Okay, so you can, we're gonna do like a turn and talk. So you're gonna be working with your partner, as Ms. Jenkins said. And so what is the one that they need something to work on?
So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to turn and talk with your partner. So somebody be buddy one, somebody be buddy two, and you're going to look at that artifact and think about how did it impact student or professional growth. And then buddy two is going to say or answer, why do you feel this artifact had the most impact on student performance? Just looking at those, the headings of that lesson plan. So decide who's going to be buddy one, buddy two, and just have a conversation. How does this impact student growth?
Take it on. I'll take better. So are we answering? Are we?
No, no. I'm just looking at that. What do you think is important?
Are they going to show us an artifact? Is an artifact right?
This is the artifact.
The lesson
Yellow,
plan
the yellow
was the
box.
artifact,
Yes,
and
okay.
Aldine, a lot of times we use a lot of artifacts, and so the lesson plan was actually the artifact, and then they just took out the highlighted parts, which is what you were paying attention to in the lesson plan. So just like here, okay, so content objectives, language objectives, how does that impact student performance? How would that grow our students?
I mean, so they have a goal in like as well as
Their purpose?
I know my whole thing was objectives are goals. Obviously, you need to be content.
It's like, what do you teach? And how are you teaching?
But even in teaching,
Because in math and English,
yeah.
this
Materials are
Yeah. Yeah, so basically that's why you do it. So just talk. Okay, talk to them. Ask them, what did they say? How would this lesson impact student growth? Or your professional growth?
Okay, so let's talk about the artifact of the lesson plan. So any comments, ideas, how is this lesson plan impact student learning? Anybody want to share? What are the key words that really caught your attention and you're like, okay, this is important. This is really going to help me to teach the students or for the students to learn.
higher order thinking skills.
High order thinking skills. Any other words? And let me ask you something. How many of you are math teachers? Raise your hand. Okay, this applies to everybody. It's not just for reading teachers. Math, science, social studies, any subject, because you're going to apply all those concepts. The content objective, which is what is the tip, what is the pretty much the objective, right? Language objective, which is the else and else is related to the English language learners. But it's important for you. Every subject has a language objective. Then we have what is the key vocabulary that you're using? What are the specific words or vocabulary that you are teaching for that specific lesson? The activities, they have to be meaningful. Otherwise, it's waste of time. When we get into the strategies and the lesson sequence, you start by I do, and who's you when it says you do?
We do.
I is me, the teacher, and who is you?
The
The
student.
student, right? So I do it, you do it. But then it's going to be a gradual release to the point that the students are going to do it independently. What else? Any ideas? Any more things that you discuss with your neighbor? Yes.
I just was thinking about how, when it's set up that way, when you're going through your lesson, plan it, was the first part for professional growth. So you're able to kind of focus in on all different factors of the lesson and not skip any parts or not, if you're looking at vocabulary, for instance, like I might, not think of it, but if I have a little rubric and I'm filling out the lesson, then I'm forced to go back and find those vocabulary words and integrating. So it's kind of to me, like this kind of structures it more, having this kind of set up and we're going to fill it in.
And it is. Thank you. Very important. It is very structured. And you know what? I always tell the teachers like that is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to. It's done like that. And one thing that is really, really important is consistency. And we have to be consistent with the way we do the things, the way we design the lesson plan. Because even the students, they notice when you are out of order, they were like, wait a minute, you didn't mention this. Or you didn't say this. And you will be surprised if they notice when you are skipping something. Okay? Thank you very much for your comments. Questions about domain one? Ideas, suggestions? Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to go into domain 4. And as she just talked about, domain 1 encompasses all those things with planning and then, of course, the monitoring of instruction. Well, domain 4 gets us into us as teachers making professional and ethical decisions. So looking at domain 4, professional responsibilities, this is all on you. Okay? So read domain 4 from the smart card and we'll listen to the narration with all the different components. Okay.
4A is reflecting on teaching. Reflecting on teaching encompasses the teacher's thinking after any instructional exercise, whether it be planning, implementation, assessment, or follow-up to instruction. Reflecting on teaching is the mark of a professional, but it must be more. The teacher must self-assess and grow from the reflection. The teacher should be able to pull from an extensive repertoire of skills and offer alternative actions to vary the course of action after reflection. 4B is maintaining accurate records. One of the most significant responsibilities for an educator is keeping accurate records for both the instructional and non-instructional events. Maintaining accurate records can be complex, but it is an essential component of the teaching profession. The teacher's system for maintaining information on student completion of assignments should be effective, accurate, and completed in a timely manner. 4C is communicating with families to enlist their participation in the educational process, which enhances learning. However, the key to soliciting family engagement in the learning process is to obtain participation in a meaningful way. Teachers should provide information related to student progress through a variety of channels. Accomplished teachers make an effort to include in the classroom learning environment students' real-world experiences. 4D is participating in a professional community. This is a rich resource that can guide and shape strategies. Teachers must work with their colleagues to share strategies, collaborate, and plan for the success of individual students. Relationships with colleagues are characterized by a mutual support and cooperation. A culture of inquiry recognizes the expertise within each school community and establishes techniques to capture and share that expertise. 4A is growing and developing professionally. This is the mark of a true professional. Given the complexity of our profession, teachers need to continuously grow and develop their skill sets. Teaching will never be perfect. Therefore, teachers can always improve. Continued learning is associated with professional standards and not viewed as a deficiency. 4F is showing professionalism. This is an elusive concept that permeates all aspects of a teacher's work and focuses on the way teachers demonstrate professionalism in both their service to students and to the profession. Accomplished teachers are guided by what is in the best interest of students. The interest of all students becomes a priority. In this component, teachers should demonstrate a willingness to support the academic needs across the entire district. In general terms, teachers will go to bat for their students. Negative attitudes are challenged to ensure that all the students are respected in the school setting. Finally, every school and district has guidelines for professional conduct. Teachers should comply fully with the regulations set forth in policy. 4G is maintaining attendance. Instructional time must always be maximized, and no substitute can match the effectiveness of the classroom teacher.
Okay, so looking at domain 4, when we look at participating in a professional community, 4D, as your appraiser is, appraising, evaluating, coming in with under professional responsibilities, we're looking at when you're in those PLCs, are you an active participant? How are you participating? Are you bringing things to the table? Most of you have either just come out of college or you're coming from a different district. You have knowledge to share in those PLCs and bring that to the table because we're trying to make sure all of our students here in Aldine are successful. Another thing I want to highlight here too, especially in Domain 4, is maintaining attendance. And Mr. Graham said it well. Nobody can replace you. When we bring in a substitute, when you come back after being gone, and you look at your room and you're like, what happened? Was Mickey Mouse Clubhouse filmed in here yesterday or what? And it's important because we want our kids at school, but we need you to be there. And a lot of times our teachers come up and they'll say, Miss Jenkins, this kid hasn't been in school for 10 days. And then I look at their attendance and they haven't been here for 4 of those days. We're always hounding on the kids, but we need to think as educators, we need to be there for our students. I know things come up. You have emergencies. You may get sick yourself, and especially if you're new to the profession and you're coming in, your immune system is very weak right now, but you will build that up. And let me tell you, what is it, airborne? That stuff works wonders. So, just thinking about you are those students' role models, and they're always watching you. And so we need to think about our professionalism as an Aldine educator.
Can I explain something?
Yes.
And what I would like to tell you about this domain, even when you think, well, this is about me, it's about the students as well. Because just looking at reflecting on teaching, that's so important. Because at the end of the day, we go home, and even that's me, I'm driving, and all the time I'm thinking, okay, what happened today? Man, I should have done it this way. Next time, if I deal with this client, I'm going to do it this other way. Because reflecting is very important because we learn from mistakes, right? And I'm sure that if you do the same lesson the following day, you will do it better. But we have to reflect on that, and that helps our teaching, and then it will help the instruction, right? And the students learning. Also communicating with families. That's very important because many times parents meet with us and they say, I don't know. Teacher never told me. I know that the kid was failing. I know the kid wasn't bringing homework. I didn't know that he was misbehaving. So you need to have the parents on your side. The best thing to do is to have that communication, and they have to trust you. And the best way to trust you is because they know you're gonna tell them when something is going on. It's not about just the negative, but also about the positive too. I remember one time that happened that the teacher called for my son. I think he was in second grade, and I thought that he did something wrong. And then teacher said, no, I want to tell you that you have a very good son. It's a wonderful student. She has been the only teacher that ever called to tell me something good. And I was like, that's awesome. Because we always call for those kids that are misbehaving, that are failing, that are not following directions. But we have to praise those that do well as well. So the parent communication has to be for all the students, not just for specific ones. So pretty much
And with that, we want to build those relationships with our students, but it's equally important to build those relationships with the parents because once they're on your side, it's going to make for a smoother year. And yes,
Yeah, I didn't catch it, but what are 4G? What was doing FMLA?
so FMLA days are your family medical leave. If you, for some reason, you have a family member and you need to take medical leave for some reason, that goes through our HR department. Um, that would exclude those days. And in our component summary, when we get into that later, that's laid out. Like I think 0 to 2 makes you a distinguished, gets you a 4 in that category. 3 to 4 is the 3 days missed. So we'll go over that component summary. It's all laid out. So you'll be able to see on that component summary, you can hit distinguished in these areas. You can hit it in every domain. But sometimes it's all about being that reflective teacher. And one thing Invest really does support is being a reflective teacher because, like we talked about yesterday, you have time to reflect on your observation. Once your appraiser comes in for your 15 minutes, you can have that. There's post conference. There's questions that'll ask you, how did the lesson go? What was your assessment? Did the lesson go as you planned? And that, invest really does support being reflective. And we need to be reflective because I do it every day on my drive home.
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't do that really well with the student today, or maybe I should ask the teacher about this. And as an educator, it's constantly what can I do to make sure all of my kids are successful in the classroom?
And domain 4 is totally on you, okay? So you could get distinguished in every one of these components. And if you know that you struggle in one or the other, let's just say you get sick, okay? You are new teachers, like Miss Jenkins just said, it's going to happen until your immune system's build up. Make sure you hit those 4s and distinguished in the other components, and it will carry your one component that you won't rate well in. But if you kind of slack and let some things slip, this domain can really, it'll make or break you in your evaluation. So just know yourself, but only you can know, where your strengths and weaknesses are in this component, okay? But like she said, we're going to go through that when we get to the rating part of it.
Okay, so guess what? Let's use our inferencing skills, and today we're going to do another scenario. Oh, you guys are sleepy today, aren't you? I am too. It's okay. It's raining. All right, so I'm going to give you a few minutes. Just read through this on your own, and you'll be matching it with the components in domain 4. So as you're reading it, you're probably really well versed in these components now that you already know what component aligns with each one.
First one is unit 1, then the alpha. I said it's similar to the unit 1, the domain 1. Then they do the six.
You have a lesson plan, I know. Oh. Okay. Thumbs up. We're ready? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Oh. I mean, it's already in your packet. Look, we know this. All right. So why would you say 4D here? Why would the expert rater say 4D? What are they doing? Right. And they're forming those relationships with the colleagues, right? Oh, good job. Okay, let's go to number 2. I'm not going to put it up this time, so don't look at your cheat sheet either. Just kidding. Okay, who'd like to read this out loud for us?
She explains that she has made a change to one component of the mentor program where once every 9 weeks the mentee gets observed, teaching a particular instructional strategy and receives feedback.
What do you think here?
For growing and developing proficiency.
And why would you say that?
Yeah, because you
Yeah, receiving the feedback from their colleagues.
Mentor and
Wow.
teaching.
Okay, number 3. Chop. Who would like to be a risk taker
Ms.
and go ahead?
Ruiz also reviews the goal of distinguished attendance 0 to 2 absences to the mentor-mentee group.
That's pretty easy. What do we say there?
4G.
4G, maintaining attendance.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
In a post-conversation with all the mentees and mentors, an observed mentee, Carrie, then considers strategies for grouping students differently to improve a lesson she taught.
And what would we say here?
For A,
For A,
she's
she modified
reflecting.
the group there,
She's reflecting.
reflecting on the teaching. Okay. Okay, number 5. Risk taking.
Okay, also Carrie and Miss Ruiz are a part of the math department, and Carrie explains to Miss Ruiz, I really look forward to the weekly meets because as our leader, You are always seeking new instructional strategies and resources for us to discuss.
And what do we say here? For us.
Well,
Okay. Decision making, service to the students. Okay, and number 6. Over here, back there. I want to hear from over there. Here we go. I love it.
Materials for their parents at open house night open house night that outline the approaches that will be used during the year in mathematics.
Good. So what would we say there? What are they doing? Communicating with families.
Same.
Okay. And number 7, our last one here. Over here.
At open house night, when asked about their student progress and plans, Natalie proudly shows her portfolio of work to her parents and explains how the document indicates the progress toward their learning.
And the answer is
or B.
for B. By elimination.
Keep it up with those accurate records.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So here's our next artifact that we have. Here's a parent-teacher conference report. Take a few minutes to just look through this parent-teacher conference report. And when you have those parent-teacher conferences, well, I'm not going to say that yet. I'm going to wait on that. I'm going to give that to you guys. Okay, so what you're going to do here, guess what? Find buddy 1 and get your buddy 2. Buddy 1, you're going to answer the first question. Buddy 2, you're going to answer the second question. So, and it's the same. Looking at this parent-teacher conference report, how do you think this can impact student or your professional growth? And then buddy 2, you're going to answer, why do you feel this artifact would have impact on student performance? So give you a few minutes to talk with your partner. Okay. Yeah, it is.
I can kind of read the underlying questions.
Too, that's what happens on your birthday.
Yes, actually, he's always excited to sign up for girls, but she has difficulty working.
Almost said.
Also, she and most of
Okay, I really like these critical conversations here. So, how do you think this artifact impacted professional growth or student growth? What are some things that you see?
I like the part that it has goals and next steps
Goals and why?
because it's something that the parents and the teacher are both working towards, or the progress of the child.
Right, because a lot of times we have those parent-teacher conferences and we go in and we talk about mainly, a lot of times it's just about, okay, your kid's not progressing, this is their reading level, this is where they need to be. And then after the conference, there's nothing, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing now? Okay, I had this conference, yeah, I can document it in eSchool, great, I got my documentation, but really, what are our next steps? So I do like this, I'm glad you pointed that out, that it gives us some goals, and it tells us as an educator, okay, this is the goal that the parent is wanting for their child, I'm going to support that goal, and this is what I'm going to be a reflective teacher, and I'm going to be able to incorporate that into my planning to make sure that student is successful. What else did you see in here? Do you like it?
Mm-hmm.
The form's good? So tell me about good.
It's detailed.
Yes. Very detailed. Mm-hmm. What else do you see?
It's specific. So it breaks down all the different work habits, all the different attitudes, so that the teacher can go right down the list as they're confident.
Okay.
One more thing here. Yes.
It answers the, it has a license and the parents.
So the parents are giving input as well. It's not just the teacher saying, but it's the parents saying as well. Now, but if you look at the way that is developed, it's positive, right?
Yes.
That because it's stating what the student is doing well, what areas of concern. Because when we communicate with parents, as I said before, we're gonna talk about everything, not just the negative, but also the positive as well. And one recommendation for you new teachers, when you have those parents that you say, well, this parent seems to be upset and I don't feel good about meeting with this parent by myself, you always need to seek for somebody, maybe your administrator, maybe one of the instructional coaches. It's just if you feel that you need that support until you know, usually it's at the beginning, the first year of your first year as a teacher, but later on you're going to get practice. And one recommendation as well, you always need to thank those parents because we need to listen. I just had a parent that called me and she had a concern. And at the end of the conversation, I told this parent, thank you for calling me. Thank you very much. I appreciate that you trust me, that you know that I'm going to do my best to solve your concern because we have to be appreciate that the parents, if they call you and they ask you, it's because they want to hear from you because they, as I say, they trust you, right? And they respect you as teachers. But again, if you want somebody to be with you with special occasions when you're gonna meet with this difficult parent, but it's gonna happen to you, have somebody else by your side, okay, to provide support.
And one of the things that we do here at Cajava Elementary, we actually have student-led conferences that we do. And because think about a student-led conference. Think about having that student in on that conference and the student talking to their parents. What happens? What's that?
Accountability.
Accountability. And a lot of times what we see is, especially like for an assessment or their daily work, what we see is we see students when they come in and they have to talk to their parents, the truth comes out. Well, you know what? I was playing paper, rock, scissors with my friend and I wasn't paying attention while she was teaching about matter or whatever the concept may be. And then the parents, that responsibility is on back on that student, right? It's not on you. So it's something to think about as you, feel more comfortable with parent-teacher conferences, but having a student-led conference and putting that responsibility back on the student takes some of that responsibility off of you.
And y'all, as new teachers and even veteran teachers, it's very a excellent idea to have a type of agenda, okay? Because, and starting with the positive, other than pre-K, some of these parents are used to being called in all the time. So their defense is already up when they're sitting before you, and you're going to give it to them one more time, okay?
Yeah.
And so you've already shut down the lines of communication between you and that parent. So start with as much positive, having something like this and saying, hey, this kid's a good listener, this kid's doing this well, and then bringing it back to, here's my concern. Who knows that child better? The parent, okay? How can we work together so this child can be successful in this class? Okay, and that's that goal part. The other good thing about having a conference, an agenda sheet or a form like this, and I know some of you are secondary folks and you're looking at this going, that's really elementary-ish. Y'all, this will save you from that conversation going the wrong way, okay? Right. You've got to, and you don't want to be there for an hour and a half with a parent taking you there, and they will, okay, because you're going to hear, especially secondary, you're going to hear about last year's teacher, 3 years ago, the elementary teacher.
You might hear about their experience in education.
Okay. So if you have something before you that the parent has a copy, you have a copy, it will keep you on track. And a conference like this could last 15 minutes. You don't have something like this, you'll be sitting there a while because you're going to hear about everybody. And you won't come to any resolution. You won't come to why you really want to meet with the parent to start with. Okay.
And one more thing, this is very good documentation that is going to help you at the end of the year. Well, it's an artifact that you can submit as well, but then you have this documentation proving that you address those concerns with the parents. So that's another important tool.
All right, so now we get to hear from one of our principals here in Aldine about the Invest